There is something I have never told anyone, not my daughter, not my pastor, not the woman who has been my closest friend for 41 years. I have carried this story inside me like a stone in still water, barely visible from the surface, but always there, changing everything around it. Tonight, I am going to tell it, all of it, because I am 83 years old, and I have learned that some truths are too important to take with you to the grave. My name is Eleanor Grace Whitfield. I was born in a small town in Virginia, married at 22, widowed at 67, and for 16 years after that, I lived alone in the house where my husband Thomas and I raised 3 children. The house is too big for one person. Everyone told me that. My daughter Patricia said it every single time she visited. My son David offered to help me find something smaller, closer to the city, closer to people. But I stayed because leaving felt like forgetting, and forgetting felt like the one thing I was not willing to do. What I am about to tell you happened on a Thursday night in November. I remember the month because the oak tree in front of my house had already lost every one of its leaves, and the street looked naked and pale under the streetlights, the way streets only look in November. I remember it was a Thursday because I had just come from my weekly appointment at the dialysis center across town. I had been going every Tuesday and Thursday for about 2 years by then. Kidney disease does not announce itself. It does not knock on your door and say hello. It simply arrives one day, quietly, through a number on a blood test, and then your life is no longer entirely your own. I was tired that night, the kind of tired that sits behind your eyes and presses forward, the kind that makes the short walk from the clinic door to the car feel like something you have to negotiate with your body one step at a time. My regular driver, the one the medical transport service usually sent, had called in sick that afternoon, so the dispatcher, a woman named Cynthia who always sounded like she was managing 3 emergencies at once, told me a substitute would be picking me up. She gave me a name. She said the driver's name was Marcus. I did not think much about it. You do not, when you are tired and cold and just want to get home to your chair and your lamp and your cup of chamomile tea. You simply wait. The car that pulled up was a dark blue sedan, clean but not new, with a small Pine air freshener hanging from the rearview mirror and a crack running along the lower right corner of the windshield. The kind of crack that spread so slowly you stopped noticing it. The man who stepped out to open the door for me was somewhere in his mid-40s, medium height, a dark wool coat that had seen better days but was clean and carefully worn. He had a quiet face. That is the only way I can describe it. Not sad, not happy, just quiet. The kind of face that has made peace with something. He said, "Good evening, ma'am. My name is Marcus. I'll be taking you home tonight." He said it the way you say something you mean. Not a script, not a performance. Just a plain, human statement of intention. I noticed that, even through my exhaustion, I noticed it. I settled into the back seat and gave him my address. He entered it into the GPS without a word, and we pulled out into the November dark. The heater was running, the seat was warm. I closed my eyes and let the motion of the car do what it always did on those rides home. Unwind me, slowly, like thread off a spool. I think I may have dozed for a few minutes. When I opened my eyes, we were at a red light on Garfield Avenue, about halfway to my house. The rain had started, soft and steady, the kind that does not hurry. Marcus had turned the wipers on at the lowest setting, and they swept back and forth with a patience that felt almost deliberate. I watched the light play on the wet pavement and thought about Thomas. I did that a lot, in cars, at night. Thought about Thomas. Then Marcus said something that I was not expecting. He said, "The dialysis center on Colton Street closes at 9 on Thursdays." I looked up at the rearview mirror. His eyes were on the road. I said, "Yes, that's right." He said, "My mother went there for about 3 years." There was a particular weight to the past tense. Went, not goes. I understood it immediately. You develop a fluency for that kind of grammar when you reach a certain age. I said I was sorry. He nodded once. The way people do when they have heard the words so many times they no longer need to respond to them, only acknowledge that they landed. We drove in silence for another minute or 2. The rain picked up slightly. And then, instead of turning right on Mercer Street the way the GPS was directing him, Marcus turned left. Now I want you to understand something about me. I am not a fearful woman by nature. I have lived long enough to know that most wrong turns are simply wrong turns. But I was alone. It was dark. It was raining. And I was 81 years old and tired to the bone. So when the car turned left instead of right, something in my chest tightened. Just slightly. Just enough. I said, "I think you missed the turn." He said, "Yes, ma'am. I know. There is something I want to show you. If you'll allow me. It will only take a few minutes, and then I will take you straight home. You'll have my word." I looked at the back of his head, the quiet face in profile, the careful coat, the pine air freshener, and I made a decision that I still think about, a decision that I cannot fully explain, even now. I said, "All right. What I want you to understand is that the word all right, spoken in the back of a dark car on a rainy Thursday night, sometimes carries the entire weight of a life." I did not know that yet, but I would. Marcus drove for about 4 more minutes. He turned onto a street I did not recognize, lined with older houses, and pulled over in front of a small building that appeared to be some kind of community center. The lights inside were on, warm and yellow through the windows. Through the rain-blurred glass, I could see movement inside, people moving back and forth, but I could not make out details. He turned off the engine but did not get out. He sat for a moment with his hands resting on the wheel, and then he said, "I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear it from the beginning, because if I start in the middle, it won't make sense." I told him I was listening, and then Marcus began to talk. He told me that his mother's name was Dora, that she had been diagnosed with kidney failure at 58, which everyone in the family called young because it was too young, and that the diagnosis had arrived in the same month that Marcus lost his job at the plant where he had worked for 11 years. He said that year felt like standing in a room where the walls were moving inward. You could see it happening. You just could not stop it. He got a job driving for the medical transport service about 2 months after Dora started dialysis. Partly because the schedule allowed him to take her to appointments himself when he was rostered for her route, and partly because it was the only work he could find quickly. He said there was something about driving people to and from that clinic, something about witnessing that particular kind of quiet exhaustion up close, that made him feel like he was doing something that mattered, even when everything else felt like it was unraveling. Dora died 14 months before the night I met Marcus. He told me this without drama, without his voice breaking, in the same measured way he had said everything else, but I saw his hands tighten slightly on the wheel, just for a moment, and I knew, the way you know things when you have lived long enough, that the stillness in his voice was not the absence of grief, but the shape grief takes when you have been carrying it for a long time. Then he said something that I have replayed in my mind perhaps 10,000 times since that night. He said, "She used to talk about the woman in the back seat." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "There was a woman, a regular C road, that route, on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Older woman." He said, "Always very polite. Always said thank you when she got out, no matter how tired she was. My mother drove her 3 or 4 times, maybe 5 times, whenever she got that route. And she always came home and talked about her. She said that woman has real grace. I could tell just from looking at her. She said she hoped that woman would be all right." Something moved through me then, something quiet and enormous at the same time, like a door opening in a house you thought you knew completely. I said, "Marcus, what was your mother's last name?" He said, "Webb, Dora Webb." And the world tilted because I remembered her. I remembered Dora Webb. I remembered her face in the rearview mirror, warm and round, with laugh lines at the corners of her eyes that seemed to have been earned rather than given. I remembered her humming softly to the radio on a Tuesday morning when I was too tired and too discouraged to make conversation. I remembered that she had once told me, without any preamble, without any context, that everything that is supposed to stay will stay. She had said it calmly, as if it were simply a fact about the physical world, the way you might say water is wet or November is cold. And I had held on to that sentence without knowing why. I had carried it home and set it somewhere inside me where I could find it in the dark. I did not tell Marcus any of this yet. I sat with it for a moment. The way you sit with something precious and fragile before you decide whether you can speak without breaking it. Outside, the rain continued its patient work on the windows. I asked him why he had brought me here, to this building. I asked what was inside. He said, "This is a free dinner for people going through medical treatment. people on dialysis, people in chemo, people whose families are trying to hold everything together. It runs every Thursday night. It was my mother's idea. She started organizing it about a year before she got sick herself. She always said that when you are fighting to stay alive, the loneliest part is the ordinary loneliness. Not having someone to share a meal with, not having anyone ask how you are and mean it. He paused. He said, it's been running every Thursday for 6 years now, even after she died. Because the people she brought together to run it just kept running it. Because she built something that knew how to continue without her. I put my hand to my mouth. Not because I was trying to contain anything, but because something in my chest had shifted so completely that I needed to hold on to my own face just to feel steady. Marcus turned in his seat and looked at me directly for the first time. He had dark eyes, careful and warm, and I saw Dora in them immediately, not in any specific feature, in the quality of attention. That same quality she had when she looked at you in the rearview mirror. That feeling of being seen without being evaluated, he said. I've been driving that route for 3 years, and whenever I picked up someone from that clinic who reminded me of her, I would think about what she said, about the woman with real grace. I didn't know who you were. I just knew you went on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I've driven you 4 times in the last 8 months, filling in when your regular driver couldn't make it, and every time, I thought about whether to say something. He said, tonight I decided it was time. I did not have words for a long moment, not because I am the kind of person who is struck speechless easily, but because something about the accumulation of what he had said, his mother, her words, this building, the years it had been running without her, all of it arrived at once, and I needed a moment to let it settle. Then I asked him why it mattered to him. I asked why, after 3 years, he felt like he needed to tell me, and he looked at me with those quiet eyes and said, because my mother saw something in you. And I think she was right. And I think some things are worth saying out loud before it's too late to say them. Before it is too late. He said it gently, but both of us understood what he meant. I was 81 years old on dialysis in November, and neither of us needed to speak plainly about what that combination might imply about Eunice. He said it with kindness, not cruelty. He said it because it was true. I looked out the window at the warm lights of the building. I could see, more clearly now, a row of tables with people seated at them, some older, some younger, some who looked like they were exhausted in the same way I was exhausted, and I saw people moving between the tables with plates, with warmth, with the particular ease of people doing something they genuinely love. I asked Marcus if he went inside on Thursday nights. He said, every week I help set up and clean up. I asked him if there was room for one more. He smiled then. The first real smile I had seen from him. It changed his whole face. It made him look younger and somehow more himself. The way people look when they drop something heavy they have been holding for a long time. He said, there is always room for one more. That was another thing my mother used to say. We went inside together, Marcus and I. He held the door open and I walked through it into warmth and light and the smell of roasted chicken and something sweet, apple or cinnamon, coming from somewhere in the back. A woman near the door, young with red hair pulled back, looked up and smiled without surprise, the way people smile when they have made a habit of welcoming strangers. She said hello and handed me a cup of coffee without being asked, which struck me as one of the most purely kind things anyone had done for me in a long time. I sat at a table near the window. Marcus sat across from me. A man to my left, perhaps in his 70s, introduced himself as Gerald. He had the careful movements of someone managing pain in the eyes of someone who had long since stopped apologizing for it. We talked for a while, Gerald and I, about ordinary things. The weather, a book he was reading, his granddaughter who had just started walking, ordinary things that felt, in that room, extraordinarily precious. At some point during the evening, when the room had filled and the tables were crowded and the sound of conversation had layered itself into something warm and continuous, Marcus leaned across the table and said, my mother would have loved this. Tonight specifically, she always said the best nights were the ones where it looked like everyone had been coming for years. I looked around the room, at Gerald, at the red-haired woman who was now sitting with an older couple, laughing at something, at a young woman near the back who was spooning food carefully, as if she needed to be gentle with herself, at the particular quality of the light, which was the kind of light that does not know how to be harsh. And I thought about Dora Webb humming to the radio on a Tuesday morning. I thought about her telling me that everything that is supposed to stay will stay with such calm certainty, as if she already knew. I thought about the fact that she built this room and then left, and the room kept being what she built it to be. There are moments in a life when you understand something not intellectually but in your whole body, when a truth you have been circling for years finally arrives at the center. This was one of those moments. And the truth, when it arrived, was this. She was not talking about things when she said what is supposed to stay will stay. She was talking about something else entirely. She was talking about the love we build into other people, the warmth we leave inside the rooms we create, the way kindness replicates itself long after the hands that first offered it are gone. She was talking about what survives. Not things, not houses, not even memories, exactly, but the shape of a person's goodness, pressed into the world like a handprint in wet cement, hardening into something that would hold long after the person had walked away. Marcus drove me home around 10 o'clock. The rain had stopped. The streets were clean and dark and reflective, throwing back the streetlights in long bright lines. I was no longer tired in the same way I had been tired 2 hours before. Something had shifted. I have tried many times to find the right word for what I felt in that car, going home, and the closest I can come is this. I felt witnessed. Not by Marcus though. His witnessing was real, but by something larger. Some mechanism in the universe that had arranged a specific sequence of events, a sick driver, a substitute, a wrong turn, a rainy night, so that I would end up in that room at that table hearing what I needed to hear. When we pulled up in front of my house, Marcus got out and opened the door the same way he had at the clinic, with the same quiet deliberateness. I took his hand as I stood, which I do not always allow myself to do, and when I was standing on the pavement I held it for a moment longer than necessary. I said, Marcus, Jamatha knew exactly what she was talking about. He looked at me steadily. I said, she told me once, in this same car, that everything that is supposed to stay will stay. I didn't understand it at the time. I thought she was talking about something in my life, but I think she was talking about herself. Something moved across his face, quick and deep, like weather moving across open water. He said, she used to say that to a lot of people. I said, I know. That's the point. He nodded slowly, and I could see him holding it. Holding what I had just given him. The idea that his mother's words had lived in a stranger for years, that they had traveled forward in time, riding inside someone he did not know yet, waiting for the right moment to come back. I said goodnight to Marcus. I walked up the path to my front door. I heard his car stay parked until I was inside, until the light in my hallway came on. Only then did I hear him pull away. I made my chamomile tea. I sat in my chair. I turned on my lamp. Outside, the oak tree stood bare and still in the November dark, and I looked at it for a long time. I have thought about that night many times since. I have thought about the word coincidence, and I have found it insufficient. I have thought about the word miracle, and I have wondered whether the word miracle has been made too large for what I experienced, inflated by expectation into something that must be dramatic, visible, unmistakable, because what I experienced was none of those things. It was small. It was human. It was a man who drove a different route and a woman who said yes in the dark, and a room full of people eating roasted chicken because someone who was gone had loved them enough to build a place where they would be fed. But I want to tell you something. In the 18 months that followed that November night, I went to that Thursday dinner every week. Every single week. I sat with Gerald and with the red-haired woman whose name was Sophie, and with a rotating population of people who were tired in the same bone-deep way I was tired, and who needed, more than anything, to be in a room where that tiredness was understood without explanation. And I want to tell you what happened at the end of that 18 months. Because this is the part of the story I said I had never told anyone, and I meant it, and I am going to tell it now. My kidney function, which had been declining steadily for 2 years, stabilized. My nephrologist, a precise and careful man named Dr. Anand Sharma, who had been watching my numbers with the particular expression doctors wear when they are preparing you for a direction you do not want to go, called me in for a consultation and told me that my latest results were not what he expected. Not dramatically better, not miraculously reversed in the way that would make a less careful man use a different word, but stabilized in a way that was, as he put it, statistically uncommon for someone at my stage. He asked me if I had changed anything: diet, exercise, medications, stress levels. I told him that I had not changed any of those things in any significant way. Then I thought about it for a moment, and I told him that I had started spending Thursday evenings with people I cared about. He wrote something in his notes. He did not comment on it, but he did not dismiss it either. I am not telling you this as a medical claim. I am not a doctor. I am an 83-year-old woman sitting in the house that is too big for one person, telling you the story of a Thursday night in November because I believe it contains something true. And what I believe is true is this: the body knows when it is loved, not in a vague or sentimental way, but in the way that sells no temperature and light, in the way that living things orient themselves toward what sustains them. Dora Webb sent her son to find me. That is not a rational statement, I know that, but I also know what I know, and I have lived long enough to stop apologizing for knowing it. She sent her son to find me because she had watched me through a rearview mirror on several Tuesday mornings and decided, in that way some people have of deciding important things quickly and accurately, that I was worth finding. And Marcus came to me on a rainy November Thursday and offered me a room full of warmth and the knowledge that I had been seen. And something in me that had been contracting for 2 years opened slowly back up, like a fist, releasing something it had been holding too tightly. Marcus and I still speak. Every few months he calls, and we talk for a while about ordinary things. Gerald passed away about a year ago, peacefully, in his own home, which was what he wanted. Sophie still runs the Thursday dinners, and she told me last spring that they had served their 5,000th meal since Dora founded the program. And she said it with the particular kind of joy that belongs to people who are carrying something forward for someone they love. There is something else I want to tell you, something I only understood much later, sitting in my chair one evening with the lamp on and the oak tree outside finally coming back into leaf after the longest November of my life. The night Marcus drove me to that dinner, when he told me about his mother, and he said she used to talk about the woman in the back seat. I was moved. I was undone by it. But some part of me was also quietly asking the question that I suspect you have been asking too. Why me? Out of all the people Dora drove to that clinic, why had she talked about me specifically? What had I done to deserve that kind of attention, that kind of remembering? It took me a long time to arrive at the answer. And when it came quietly, the way the most important answers always do. I had not done anything unusual. I had not performed any dramatic act of generosity or said anything particularly wise. What Dora had noticed, what she had carried home and told her son about, was something much simpler. It was the thank you. The fact that I said thank you every time I got out of that car, no matter how tired I was, no matter whether the ride had been smooth or awkward or entirely silent. I said thank you, because Thomas had taught me that gratitude spoken aloud costs nothing and means everything. And I had been saying thank you at the end of every car ride for 60 years without ever expecting it to land anywhere in particular. But it had landed. It had landed in Dora Webb, and she had carried it home and told her son, and her son had carried it forward through 3 years of grief and driving. And then he had turned left instead of right on a rainy November Thursday and delivered it back to me in a form I could never have imagined. This is what I want you to hear. Not the miracle of stabilized kidney function, though I do not minimize it. Not the extraordinary coincidence of the substitute driver in the wrong turn, though I do not take it lightly. What I want you to hear is this. The thank you, the small, reflexive, habitual thank yous that I said without expecting anything in return. That is where everything began. In that moment, in that small, true, ordinary thing. We spend so much of our lives waiting for the meaningful gesture, the grand gesture, the moment when we will do something important enough to matter. And all the while, the meaningful gestures are already happening. They are the small, true things we do without an audience. The thank you at the end of a car ride. The sentence spoken to a stranger that they will carry for years without our knowing. The dinner organized in a community center that continues to feed people long after the hands that made it are still. I am 83 years old. I have buried a husband and a dear friend and a world that no longer quite exists. I have sat in dialysis chairs twice a week for years and watched the numbers on my blood work with the careful attention of someone who has learned not to look away from what is real. I have lived long enough to know that life does not hand out miracles the way we imagine miracles. It does not part the sky or stop the rain or return what is gone. What it does, sometimes, if you are paying attention, if you have been saying thank you in the dark without expecting it to go anywhere, is send a quiet man in a dark blue sedan on a rainy November night to take you somewhere you did not know you needed to go. And in that room, in that warm and ordinary room, it gives you back something you did not know you had lost. The word for it is not miracle. The word for it is not coincidence. The word for it is not even grace, though that comes closer. The word for it, I think, is love. Traveling forward through time in the only way love really travels. Person to person, thank you to thank you, stranger to stranger, room to room, finding us when we are tired and cold and sitting in the back of a car going home in the dark, finding us at exactly the moment when we are most in need of being found. I still go to the Thursday dinners when my health allows. I still sit near the window. I still say thank you when Marcus drives me, and he still smiles, the smile that makes him look like his mother. And neither of us says anything about it because neither of us needs to. The oak tree outside my house came back in the spring, as it always does. And every year when the leaves return, I think about November and about rainy glass and about a woman named Dora Webb, who saw something in me through a rearview mirror and thought it was worth carrying home. She was right. She was absolutely right. And the most extraordinary thing, the thing I lie awake, turning over in the small hours of the night, is that I do not think she knew how right she was. I do not think she knew that those few words, spoken quietly to her son, would survive her by years and travel through grief in November and a wrong turn and a community center full of warm light to arrive, finally, at an old woman in a chair who needed to hear them more than she knew. But that is the nature of the small, true things. They do not wait for permission. They do not require a witness. They simply travel quietly, patiently, at their own pace, toward wherever they are needed, and they always arrive exactly on time.